Okay, I'm out here at the beautiful CSI Breckenridge Endowment Farm. I'm out in one of our alfalfa hay fields. This stand's been in for about 4 years. It's nearing its end of life, but we've noted a few irrigation problems. One of the things about irrigation, it's hard to sense or detect to know when your plants have enough water. So we're going to install this watermark, this Irromemeter Watermark granular matrix sensor into the ground to give us some more data to help plan our irrigation. I'm going to need a few things to do this. I've brought my sensor out here from inside. It's been soaking in irrigation water for at least overnight. It's nice and wet. I've got a container here with the water in it, which I'm going to use to mix. I've got a spoon here to help mix some soil with the water. You're going to see how that's going to work here in a minute. I've got my soil probe here. It's ready to go, and I have my soil moisture meter with me as well. So I'm going to start by going ahead and probing a hole with the soil probe, or digging a hole with the soil probe. I'm going to move this just a little bit out of the way here. See, I've got a little bit of a test hole here just to see where things were at. And this is a good spot for me. When you're looking for a location, it's best to find a place that's representative of what irrigation is going on. I don't want to be on edges. I want to be in a part of the field where I want to know what's going on with the irrigation. You can see this is a prime candidate because there's some dry, we have incomplete sort of population here. There's probably some problems with the irrigation system where it's hitting this, so I want to see where that's at. So I'm going to take my soil probe. If your soil is dry like it is here, it's going to be difficult to get down too deep. If I was doing this for agronomic purposes, I would want to be probably setting one at 6 inches, 12 inches, and also at 24 inches. Whether or not you can get that is really not important, but you want to be able to get that sensor covered up. This is really dry, so you might hit rocks and things like that, so it may take more than one attempt to find a suitable location. And I can tell right there I'm probably on some kind of a rock, so that didn't work. The nice thing is, it gives me a chance, in any case, to look at my soil moisture, and you can see, look at this, this is dry, this is really powdery. This field did get cut recently and baled, so it's going to be a bit drier than I'd expect it to be. I'm going to go back into this hole right here. I'm hitting another rock, so don't be discouraged if you're hitting rocks. That's just, if you're in certain parts of the world, that's quite normal. So feeling pretty good about this spot here. Get that soil probe down in there. Carefully pull that up. And you can see the top layer here is a bit wet, but beyond that, it's pretty powdery. There's just not a lot going on here. With as clay as the soil is here, that's an indication that it's dry. It needs a drink. If you're trying to determine depth without using a ruler or a tape measure, you can use the distance between your thumb and your index finger. So you can see that's just about 6 inches. I might need to go a little bit deeper. I want to make sure I'm saving this soil here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little pile of that right here to the side. So I'm going to be needing this for making my soil moisture mix. Let's go ahead and see if we can't go down just a little bit deeper. I can get just a little bit more of a plug out of that. Okay, so I've got my soil right there. And I think I'm down as deep as I really need this to be for what we're going to be doing today. I might need to go just a little bit deeper. Of course, sometimes when you're doing this as dry as it is, it'll want to cave itself back in. And if you're unsure if you've got enough depth, just take your sensor, put it in the ground, and that looks like it's about right for what I need. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a little bit of this water, I'm going to pour it down into the bottom of the hole the sensor is going to go into. And I'm going to decant quite a bit of this because I don't need this much. I'm going to mix soil and the water together to make a grout. So I'm going to go ahead and give this plant here a little bit of a drink. And it really doesn't take a lot. In fact, be surprised how far that goes. So I've kept about that much water in. That's probably too much. So just a small amount of water. I've got maybe a thumb's width worth there. And that's still probably going to be too much. I'm going to go ahead and try to collect some of this soil that I've gotten. I don't want a lot of vegetative mass in there. That's not going to help me out. And I can go ahead and just use my spoon here and dig in just a little bit more of this. I don't want to make a big divot around this because that might influence what's happening in that hole. So once I've got that, I'm going to just take this and mix it till I get the desired consistency. And if you're looking for mud, it really boils down to it. And it may be prudent to bring a shovel or something like that to get just a little bit more, quite a bit of vegetation in there. So I'm going to take some of that out. The hands are going to get dirty in this process. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not expecting this soil to get completely hydrated in there just because there are a lot of clays and it's going to take quite a bit of time for that to happen, but I want a nice mud. So I keep just grabbing a little bit more here and there too. If you're doing a 1 foot or 2 foot installation, there's never going to be a problem with having enough soil, but I kept a little bit too much of that water in there. Consistency really isn't super important. All we're looking for is good soil sensor contact. That's what this grout facilitates. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. You really just need enough in your hole to cover up the sensor. So I'm going to go ahead and pour my grout down into that hole. Go ahead and start my sensor in there. And I'm going to carefully take my soil probe and I'm going to push that down to the bottom of the hole. Now, in a perfect world, we'd take probably some PVC. In fact, it's probably best to do this, but you could take some PVC and push it down with PVC, but I'm going to just feed these leads through hold that so I don't cut them in the process of doing installation. And I can just take my probe and send that thing home down on the bottom of that. That's right about where I want it. That's a good installation. I can take some of the surrounding soil just to sort of cover that borehole back up. Right? We don't want it being influenced by any sorts of divots and dips in the ground, and that should give me what I need. Make sure the 2 leads are still exposed. It's probably a good idea to take these and coil them up. Okay, so they're not going to be, no one's going to trip on them. You're not going to have any hazards like that. You can leave that there like that. I'd recommend getting some flagging tape or a landscaping flag and put that in place so it can be seen, especially if you have people mowing a lawn, or in our case we have swathers that run through here, and these can't, because of their color, they can't be seen very well, and if you run across it with a blade, it's going to disconnect that. These can stay in their installation state through a growing season. When we're ready to do the reading, all we do is we pull out our soil moisture meter, our Watermark soil moisture meter. We connect the BNC connector at the top that has the 2 alligator clips. I'm going to go ahead and connect my 2 leads. Doesn't matter which attaches to which lead. It's omnidirectional, so it doesn't really matter. Just you make sure they don't want to be touching each other. I'm then going to hit the read button. In fact, if you forget, typically these have an instruction on here to read sensor. Press read. You probably can't see it, but there's 2 dashes on there. If I press read again, I waited too long, and it gives me a reading of 2. Now, that number really doesn't make sense because this needs about 24 hours to acclimate with the soil, at least, to make sure it's come into equilibrium with soil moisture. The number that we read on here is actually the amount of tension that is being pulled by the soil on the water. So our reading here is in centibars or kilopascals. It's nice because it's the same number. So a reading of 0 would mean there's no tension on the sensor, meaning there's free water. So a very low number means that I have a fair amount of water already existing in the soil. If I get a really high number, that is an indication there's a lot of tension, and that's the soil trying to pull the water away from the matrix, the granular matrix within that sensor. So a high number is an indication that my soil is dry. Now right now it's reading 2 because it's in a saturated environment. There's a fair amount of free water in there. But if I come back to this sensor tomorrow, I expect that number to be considerably higher. That number can then be correlated with the amount of plant available water, which is really what we want to know, is how much plant available water is in your soil. Each plant has a different requirement of how much soil moisture it requires in a given soil. So those numbers end up being important for our irrigation management and for protecting our resources.